and they were caught. Now, it is perfectly possible to remain respectful, magnanimous, and well-meaning toward Biden in terms of his battle with cancer, while continuing to seek answers to questions about who knew what and when. And we're not going to stop pursuing those answers, even though we are saddened by the Biden diagnosis and wish him well, of course. I wish him a recovery. It's a terrible thing to go through cancer. Almost everyone in the country probably knows someone who's had cancer or who has died of cancer. It's not about that. I hope his health improves dramatically. But I was just waiting for some Democrat to say, oh, because of the diagnosis, we should really stop investigating who tried to, accommodate him and who tried to conceal that he wasn't doing too well. Let's just not ask questions about that. No, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
The way that you're saying it is like it's 2 weeks of Democrats saying this. They said it the day that we found out he had cancer. The public did. They said it the day after. And I think, yes, there's going to be intense scrutiny. Yes, we should talk about the 2024 election and Biden's term. But I think we should also take a minute as humans to look at the life of somebody who really spent time and time again beating the odds and turmoil, specifically when it comes down to family members passing away or hard experiences. And that's what he's saying, is just take a breath. It's okay for us to not constantly be in the form of attack. I mean, we've been hashing through how cognitive Biden was since the day that he showed up on that debate stage last June. I mean, we got it. The media maybe didn't do as good of a job as you think before that. But from June to now, we've been covering Biden's health. And it's like, take a minute to just respect the person. Now, I also think that obviously the American public is confused and wants some answers. So PSA tests for most presidents, which would detect prostate cancer,
yes,
happens often. And so we need to understand why, if the levels were rising in any way, that wasn't flagged as something they were looking out to. But I also have another question about, the way that we protect HIPAA laws as regular people and constituents is totally different for presidents. So we want to know how much Trump weighs. We want to know how Biden's doing with everything. And I don't think that it's unfair of a question to ask, especially if you're throwing your name back in the hat for another presidency. But I do think that you're allowed to say something like a cancer diagnosis when you're prepared and ready to do so. And perhaps that just wasn't the case when he was actually running, and something that he maybe found out in the last 5 months. That could be very viable. Now, I think we can do this and look at a lot of what happened to Biden without ageism, without cruelty, but with honesty. So like I said, on both sides of the aisle, people want some answers. But David Axelrod has a point. Maybe yesterday wasn't the exact time to do it, right after we discussed the fact that he was diagnosed with cancer. You can give it a little bit of breath. It's okay for journalists to give things some breath. And, like you said about this book coming out, from Axios, Alex Thompson.
Yeah, the original sin book.
He's been looking at this. He's been looking at this for a long time. It's not like, it's like one and done. He's been looking at this deeply, Biden's cognitive decline, and so have many people. And so it's one thing to blame the media, but it's another thing to say that you're going to get upset that somebody's having empathy in these times, because these moments that bring the country together, as you've seen.
Empathy is very important. It's just, I guess I don't, because I now know a lot about the efforts Democrats went to cover up his declining health. I don't trust, the Biden team doesn't have trust and credibility with me. So when they release this announcement the same weekend that the Her tapes come out and 48 hours before the original Sin book is supposed to come out, and they say, oh yeah, we just found out about this on Friday, can you, pity me, do the empathy thing, I think it's very suspect timing. Now, you could say that's, no, they didn't try to hide that from you, Robby, but how would you know if they didn't try to hide? They did try to hide something from you. So that's when you mislead people once, you break faith with people. So we're saying, how could he not know, previously that he had a cancer diagnosis? Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. Maybe they just missed it. I was listening to Zeke Emanuel. I think it was Zeke Emanuel. It's Rahm Emanuel's brother, who's a doctor. He was on CNN or ABC or somebody yesterday or the day before saying that, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It is certain he had it already. Maybe they didn't, the cancer at this stage.
Right, you see levels jump, and that's an indicator.
It's possible they didn't catch it, but again, for how checked the president is. And I would say the same thing about Trump. Trump's health is scrutinized by the media to a large degree. They are always asking questions about them. I remember conversations about whether the amendment to make you not the president anymore, which was the 28th, 27th, I can't remember.
We're going to be
which
talking
should be
about
invoked
this.
on him, and to not ever bring that in the context of Biden is just pretty crazy to me. But
there's lots more to discuss. We're going to keep talking about this and stay on top for everyone.
Definitely have not heard the last word from me on this. Take it away.
Next up, President Trump is optimistic about Russia and Ukraine peace talks, but others aren't so happy.
President Trump seems optimistic about peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine.
Trump held a phone call with both Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin.
Trump wrote in part on Truth Social, Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire, and more importantly, an end to the war. The conditions for that will be negotiated between the two parties, as it can only be because they know details of a negotiation that nobody else would be aware of. Trump also said that Russia wants to do large-scale trade and that Ukraine could be a beneficiary in trade as well. Now, the Vatican, at least according to Trump, is actually open to hosting those peace talks. Putin described the call as a meaningful and frank one.
On Sunday, however, Russia launched its largest drone attack in Ukraine since the start of the war, per Reuters, and some weren't happy about Trump's latest announcement. Veteran and author Alexander Vindman wrote on X, "This is today's version of, quote, ill end of the war, day one. This statement is meaningless as Putin has zero interest in negotiating. It's way past embarrassing watching Trump get played by Putin."
Meanwhile, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote, "I have adamantly been opposed to the Ukraine-Russia war from the start and never voted to fund this war. I'm grateful that President Trump talked with Putin. There's now the prospect of peace and future trade with both countries." I, too, want an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. I think we all do. That is only going to come about through diplomacy. It's not going to come about, in my view, through Ukraine ever defeating Russia. That can't happen. Ukraine's own advisors don't think that. U.S. military advisors don't think that. The sanctions we've placed or that Europe placed on Russia have done very little. I was reading, this is a report from the New York Times, not some crazy contrarian, conspiratorial right-wing source, that the Russian military recruitment is up. They're not like losing their net recruitment is increasing despite huge numbers of casualties and injuries among their troops that they send into Ukraine. So it's not going to be a military defeat. It's going to be a slow conquest of Ukraine, or less slow by the day. And so it is definitely time for diplomacy. I love to hear Trump say he wants trade. I'm all about trade. get Russia-Ukraine trading, get them financially intermingled in a way that will be less likely to result in warfare. That all sounds great to me.
Well, Trump and Putin sat on the phone for 2.5 hours yesterday. He came out with a stance that felt very optimistic. I think that it was a bit performative. He spoke to Putin in February this year also. This is the second call on record that we know that they had. And nothing was accomplished then. And a lot of people feel that nothing was accomplished now. He said they will immediately begin ceasefire talks. I don't know that to be true. It feels like Vladimir Putin in many ways is mocking us at this point. He didn't show up to the Istanbul talks when Zelensky pleaded with him to please show up so that they can have a conversation when Trump was on that side of the world. So I don't think that he's taking these talks very seriously. Just so because Trump says it, if we're going based on history from this year alone, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. And so I think at this point, we have to figure out what the way forward is. And it's certainly, to me, not making Ukraine out to be the aggressor and Russia to be the victim. Because the way that Trump even positions his stances and the way that he's communicating this is on the side of a dictator. And I think by cowering and even making those concessions and leaving $3 billion that Congress has already approved for Ukraine in limbo so they can't use it to defend themselves while Russia is beefing up its troops, we are kind of just leaving them out to dry.
Okay,
we are leaving...
Tell me then, what's your plan? What are we supposed to do?
I think that he needs to first just start with the conversation of treating Ukraine like the victim. He needs to understand.
How does treating Ukraine like a victim get us one iota closer to
because
peace?
Because he's berating this man so he's having private calls with Putin, but berating Zelensky publicly. That's totally inappropriate for understanding our diplomatic relationships. I mean, like I said about, which I don't know was the right thing to do, we dangled NATO over Ukraine. And so in part, we are involved in this. It was, and we're in this situation. But now that you're still the United States trying to protect Ukraine from an obvious aggressor, the way forward is not constantly trying to embarrass the smaller country and say, yes, Russia, keep illegally annexed Crimea, keep doing what you want.
We didn't tell them to keep doing it.
We're telling Zelensky to accept whatever Putin is putting on the table. And so that means the U.S. is cowering to a dictator. So it's like dictators, come on, do whatever you want. The U.S. is not going to do anything about it. And I think that is a ridiculous stance.
I think it's ridiculous to say we didn't do anything about it. We gave Ukraine $100 billion, and the country is still losing this fight because they can't possibly win it. We need to be realistic. The reality is Ukraine will be conquered by Russia, and with everyone dead in the country, the longer this goes on. So we need an immediate end to the conflict that will be not under favorable terms to Ukraine. This is not ideal.
It shouldn't be just favorable to Russia, though. A deal...
But they're the winning country of the conflict.
But in a deal, if Trump is bartering the agreement and putting himself in the middle of it like he did all over the campaign trail, and I know now he wants to step back and let them handle it, but he said in 24 hours of him... It's been 5 months and 24 hours, by the way. But in 24 hours of him taking office, he would get this resolved. Obviously not the case.
I think he's trying to get the most favorable deal possible for Ukraine, but that it's difficult because they don't have a good bargaining position. Because Russia is willing to lose a lot of human life, unfortunately, in their pursuit of the conquest of the country. And if they're willing to do that, what do we have to bargain against?
Well, the U.S. has, the luxury of being the superpower of the world. And so I think in many ways we can do much more to try to protect Ukraine and try to negotiate an agreement that is at least fair to the smaller country that's under a barrage of attacks. I mean, for Putin to have conversations with Trump to signal for his people in his, in his cabinet to signal that they're going to try to come to a peaceful end of this war, and then to barrage Ukraine with drone attacks on Sunday, a day before you're speaking to our president, is a complete lack of respect. And so I think the more that we disrespect Ukraine, the more that we exacerbate the situation.
I don't see how there will be any resolution other than Russia keeps the territory it took, no NATO membership for the rest of Ukraine, but a peace agreement that Russia is not going to invade any further, and that the security of Ukraine is then up to its European neighbors, and then maybe we have some trade deal or some minerals deal or some involvement of the country that way. I don't know. That's how it's going to end. It's going to end like that, or it's going to end with Russia controlling the entire country. It's going to be one or the other. I don't see any foreseeable future. It's like they're going to greet us as liberators thinking, to think that Ukraine is going to somehow win back its territory. I mean, right? No one has a plan for Ukraine to recover the territory.
Hopefully these talks start immediately, like Trump said yesterday. Immediately.
Next up, Bernie Sanders takes a shot at Democrats while he is on Andrew Schulz's podcast. Some interesting remarks we'll discuss. Stay tuned.
resolution to censure Rep. McIver from New Jersey. Her actions last Friday were absolutely unacceptable. We have to be held to a better standard, and she needs to be held accountable for her actions.
South Carolina Representative William Timmons is joining the chorus of voices calling on House Speaker Mike Johnson to censure and even expel New Jersey Congresswoman LaMonica McIver after she was charged yesterday in connection to that scuffle outside an ICE detention facility that you're seeing on screen.
McIver was charged with assaulting, impeding, and interfering with ICE agents. McIver has insisted that it was the ICE agents who got rough with her and her colleagues, not the other way around, as the U.S. attorney would suggest. McIver issued this statement yesterday saying, quote, "We were fulfilling our lawful oversight responsibilities as members of Congress have done many times before, and our visit should have been peaceful and short. Instead, ICE agents created an unnecessary and unsafe confrontation." She continued, quote, "The charges against me are purely political. They mischaracterize and distort actions that are meant to criminalize and deter legislative oversight."
Not everyone is buying that this was a simple oversight trip. Take a listen to Scott Jennings on CNN.
The videos are pretty clear, are they not? I mean, she's shoving,
so.
Elbows, some punches. I mean, this is
a lot of
violent
pushing
activity
and
against law enforcement, isn't it?
It's a lot of pushing and shoving. I don't know if...
Would a regular person, if they came and did that to a federal officer, get away with it? If the argument is, oh, we're here to conduct legitimate oversight, is that what oversight looks like? Pushing and shoving and elbowing and causing a riot at a federal facility?
So Democrats in Congress and beyond have flocked to McIver's defense, including New Jersey Senator Cory Booker and Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, who also were involved in the scuffle. Mayor Baraka was arrested on trespassing charges, but those charges were dropped yesterday, a move that many on the left say demonstrates that the charges in this case are arbitrary and politically motivated.
Do you think they are...
The process is the punishment. They don't care if they lose. A normal Department of Justice would never bring this case. They wouldn't have had to have the embarrassment of dropping the charges against Mayor Baraka because they were unfounded. They are bullies. They're abusing the Constitution.
Well, look, I saw the video footage, as did you. There certainly was some shoving and scuffling with the police officers. Now, I don't know.
On both sides.
I don't know who started it. I don't know if, I mean, not that you can't fight the cops.
Right, that's
Scott Jennings is correct that anyone will be charged for fighting the cops. Now, because I'm more libertarian leaning, I don't reflexively take the side of the police in every single dispute with either a lawmaker or just a civilian. So I would want to know more about the context of how that scuffle unfolded. I mean, I think you have the right to defend yourself if you're being, assaulted by a police officer or anyone else. So I would like to know more, and they did have the right to be there and inspect the facility because they're members of Congress. I also don't think we need to start censoring, like, literally everyone. The censor power is starting to get overused. If she was maybe convicted of some assault, then you might do a censor, but I would hold off on that on this basis. I basically just want to know more. I don't have strong views yet about whether she was in the wrong or the police were in the wrong. I'm open-minded to it, and I don't have a decision to. I'm not weighing in. That's my take.
I think as a member of Congress, I agree with you. She has a right to see how people are detained. She wants to really...
She has that legal right.
She has that
Congress people can always inspect these facilities.
And as an elected official, it's actually her responsibility to make sure that if constituents have a concern about this, or she does as a leader, to go check it out. And this is not the first time. Many people have done this in the past. So I think, for the Trump administration and for federal officials to cast this narrative that they were so violent is ridiculous, especially when Trump blanket pardoned the entire January 6th mob and riot. And we know that 5 people were dead, 140 different officers were injured. And so if those are people that you would pardon, how dare you say that elected officials that were actually trying to do their job when you're seeing other angles of a video getting shoved are doing something wrong and illegal?
We shouldn't behavior now because Trump pardoned January 6ers. I didn't agree with pardoning the violent January 6ers, but you agree that people should stay consistent in their views. And I think this is very wildly inconsistent with the views of pardoning people who've hurt 140 officers at our Capitol on January 6th, when these are people who are elected officials that were just simply trying to do their job that were also shoved. We need to watch this video and let this play out, hopefully not
not in court. Hopefully they can solve it like they did with Ras Baraka. I think that if they take this all the way to trial, they're wasting taxpayers'
Funny enough,
money.
he's the one who did not have the absolute right to inspect the facility because he's a mayor rather than a elected official. Members of Congress, according to the law, can inspect these. So he actually was trespassing if he tried to enter. He doesn't have the right to enter, but they decided not to bring charges against him. So that suggests to me it is about the shoving, but I don't want to overhype that without really understanding the context of it.
So we'll stay on top of it. Governor Tim Walz had some choice words for ICE agents. That's next.
Governor Tim Walz just compared federal ICE agents to President Trump's personal Gestapo. Remember, the Gestapo were Hitler's secret police of Nazi Germany, responsible for suppressing opposition and persecuting the Jews during the Holocaust.
During a commencement speech at the University of Minnesota Law School, Governor Walz slammed Trump's latest immigration moves and his ICE agents. Take a look.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared. To be clear, there's no way for us to know whether they were actually criminals or not.
Now, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller blasted Walz, writing on X, "This vile anti-American language can only be construed as inciting insurrection and violence." The Department of Homeland Security also criticized Walz's statement on X, saying it's absolutely sickening to compare ICE law enforcement agents to the Gestapo. "Our message is clear. Do not come to this country illegally. If you do, we will arrest you, deport you, and you will never return." Strong words from Stephen Miller. I don't think it's incitement or whatever he said to criticize ICE agents or use very incendiary or hyperbolic language to describe them that way. I don't think it's helpful to describe them that way. It's a bit dehumanizing, even though I do not agree with all of the immigration priorities of this administration. I think the American people want violent illegal immigrants who are associated with gang activity to be removed from this country as swiftly as possible. We need a process to make sure that we are apprehending the correct people, that we are not deporting American citizens. They are due some level of process. It's not the same as a criminal proceeding, so they don't have all the same rights as a citizen who is facing prosecution for some criminal offense or a non-citizen. Non-citizens have that same right, but in terms of deportation, the rights are a little different. But I, too, don't want people disappeared into vans by masked agents and sent to some prison in El Salvador. Frankly, the prison in El Salvador part is making it a little more horrifying, because that is giving it, like, if you're deporting people and just literally moving them out of the country, the government has to move to do that swiftly with people who are legal immigrants. The part where their final destination is this horrific prison is, I think, making a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, let's slam the brakes on this, because we don't want this to happen to people. Even if they're not citizens and they shouldn't be here, do they need to be in a prison in El Salvador? Those are my thoughts.
Well, I think, first of all, people just want something to be outraged about. Trump on the campaign trail last year, and this is a report in our very own The Hill, said his administration was a, quote, Gestapo administration. And nobody really had anything to say about that, right? I mean, obviously people on the left were criticizing him, but here we go again with this circle of criticism. But to bring it back to the actual conversation, I think this comparison to everything of, this is like the Holocaust, this is like Nazis, especially in the line and in terms of Trump, is so dramatic and overused that I think we honestly run the risk of trying to constantly minimize a horrific situation and comparing that to every little decision he makes. So I do believe that we should stop using that comparison altogether unless there actually is a worthy comparison. Picking up people off the street and deciding to do what you're doing with the way that he's implementing immigration is not the way that I would go about it, but I also don't think that that's a good comparison. And Tim Walz at this graduation speech, to me, is a misuse of the term. But I do think that he, importantly, is pointing out something that is wrong. Americans agree that we do need to fix our immigration system. That was one of Biden's Achilles heels. But they don't agree with the way that Trump administration is going about it. I mean, there's been reports of ICE officials being outside of churches, arresting people, considering going into schools. And these are places where people should feel protected and safe in our country. And also we saw, growing up in New York, how stop and frisk went, right? So what does an immigrant look like? Immigrants are from Ukraine. Immigrants are from Afghanistan. Immigrants are from Venezuela. And so if we just decide, ICE agents, that we're just going to pick people up that look like immigrants and then detain them and send them somewhere else, we run the risk of picking up actual Americans and being in a crisis where we're not abiding by due process and sending people in the wrong direction.
Well, you're getting at exactly what worries me, because when the administration was defending what it was doing, for instance, with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and on that front, this is someone who I think there's been plenty of evidence presented that he was in fact a gang member, and that there's every reason to deport him. They were not supposed to deport him to El Salvador, although that is where he is from. He is now back in the country he's from. I'm kind of like, why would we kidnap him back to this country when he's now in the country he belongs in? That one was obscuring where I think there was a stronger argument from the anti-immigration people, was obscuring some other cases where, but the Trump administration is taking the position that they don't have to bring anybody back because when they're not in the country. And I'm like, well, if you're saying that, would that logic also apply to an American citizen? You're like, well, now they're not in the country, we don't have to get them back. I'm like, okay, but if you flew them out of the country, then I think you do have to bring them back. And then some of what we saw, especially with the campus, the kind of pro-Palestinian people who I don't agree with at all, but you wrote an op-ed and now you're being visited by the police and they're going to move to deport you. I don't think we should be deporting people who just expressed a viewpoint or engaged in speech that is clearly constitutional. If they were not a citizen, then it's just only so non-citizens don't get to say anything? I don't think do Republicans even agree with that? They should be able to, we're for speech. We're for more free speech. So that's all not great.
And I think that undocumented immigrants, the conversation that they're constantly committing crimes is just wholly untrue, right? Mm-hmm. We know the numbers, we both do, that it's not that more undocumented immigrants are committing more crimes than Americans, or even per capita of how many of them here are committing crimes. So I think that we need to figure out that we, allow certain protected status. We want people to come here because they're fleeing really horrendous situations. And so when we put them in a position where they're constantly being threatened, yes, the number of immigrants have gone down, and yes, perhaps it's saving us some money, but not close to the amount that Trump said that he wanted to save on the campaign trail. We have a long way to go, and I think that there may be a more thoughtful approach to trying to figure out immigration rather than just throwing people in vans.
I want crime dealt with regardless of whether the perpetrator is an illegal immigrant or not. I don't care their skin color or their income level or their gender or their any other identity. I just want crime dealt with. Now I know, but many conservatives will say, okay, but even if immigrants aren't, or illegal immigrants aren't responsible for disproportionate amounts of crime, they should not be here anyway. So one crime by an illegal immigrant is too many because they're not supposed to be here. So I have heard that argument, and
I mean, the not supposed to be argument is just so interesting to me because our country was built on migration. You know what I mean? So I think finding reasonable solutions for people to try to come to America is a viable path forward.
Yeah, but I don't think
people go through the right channels. I'm not saying they should run across and hop fences.
Yeah, I know you're not saying that, but I also don't think that you're a refugee. It's sad for you there. I mean, we might be sad for you, but we can't fix all the world's problems. There's a lot of dysfunction in a lot of places of the world. I want to bring people here if they're going to be a net benefit for our country, and many of them are. They're going to work hard. They're going to be a net contributor to our welfare system. They want to help. It can be low-skilled immigration if they want to help build houses. It can be high-skilled immigration if they're all computer geniuses, whatever it is. But it's not, for me at least, it's not so much like we're helping for just purely altruistic humanitarian reasons. I think that's too much, frankly, to ask of the American people. That's not the American people's views, that we are responsible for being altruistic and just bringing everyone here for their own good. The reason to do it is that it's economically beneficial for all of us in a lot of cases, but it's got to be a case-by-case basis, and we got to make sure there's no violence or gang affiliations or terrorism, or it's just going to be flooding the education system or the health care system. But that still leaves room for a lot of good, solid immigration to take place orderly. I hope we have immigration reform so that's not rushing the border, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we can agree on that one.
Next up, Bernie Sanders is taking a shot at Democrats while on Andrew Schulz's podcast. We'll discuss. Senator Bernie Sanders admitted on comedian Andrew Schulz's Flagrant podcast that Democrats were a threat to democracy.
It all started when Sanders defended his support for then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton in 2016. Then Flagrant co-host Akash Singh asked Bernie this question. Take a look.
Ostensibly, there hasn't been a fair primary for the Democrats since 2008. Are they not also a threat to democracy? Yes. We often hear...
Fair enough. That is, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that point. And that's why I'm proudly an independent. And that's the struggle. Are they going to open the door, or are they prepared to lose elections literally and maintain the
status
go
quo.
down with the Titanic?
Sanders also said that he thinks he's run his last race since he is 87 years old. He addressed his oligarchy tour and whether he viewed Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as his successor.
Oligarchy tour is you passing the baton.
No, don't look at it like that. The oligarchy tour is...
I think we're all looking at it like that.
No, it's not passing the baton. I happen to, I think Alexandria is great. But it's not my job to determine who the new leaders are.
Democratic strategist and former advisor to Kamala Harris, Mike Nellis, has an optimistic view of the interview, writing on Blue Sky, quote, really glad to see Bernie Sanders following Pete Buttigieg's lead in going on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schulz. Good content.
Yeah, I think it was good content. I'm not surprised. Bernie Sanders has always been more willing than many other Democrats to be in different media environments, to allow people who don't explicitly agree with him. I mean, this is his model of social change. People who don't know, he would probably say, they do agree with me, they just don't know it. But I'm going to talk to them about my economic issues, my working class issues, and try to win them over. He famously was on Joe Rogan, although at that time Joe Rogan was kind of an ideological fellow traveler of Bernie Sanders. I also saw a clip from this interview where he really laid into, Bernie Sanders did, into identity politics, talking about how it's just poison for Democrats to uplift those issues. While we certainly want non-discrimination and good treatment for everyone, it's like your identity doesn't make you a good person. It's what you stand for, what your values are, that I think is very, very appealing, especially to the podcast bro kind of circuit. He talked about how his supporters, were smeared as sexist and racist by, he said, just by the Democratic establishment that was totally beholden to Hillary Clinton and was totally trying to get him out of the way so that he would not be an obstacle to her coronation as the nominee and then the president.
Coronation.
That's basically what it was.
That's
what they wanted it to be. It was not a coronation.
I often think about what would have happened if Bernie Sanders would have progressed forward. We would have had a different conversation.
We would have had President Bernie Sanders.
We may have never seen Trump. Maybe it would have been a good thing.
I think Bernie very well, I think he certainly could have. I think he might have even been likely to win in 2016 because just based on the outcome in the
momentum.
race.
Young people loved him. But one thing that I love about...
Sorry, I'll stop cutting you off. But she lost Pennsylvania and Michigan, states where I think Bernie would have overperformed her. But go ahead.
Right, simple numbers thing. I think that Bernie has been consistent in his views of just staying and protecting the working class. And I think both parties can learn from them. I mean, the big budget bill trying to cut Medicaid for millions of Americans, Republicans can learn from him, but also Democrats can learn from him of stop going with the flow and the establishment and understand that the working American feels forgotten about. You guys are speaking over their heads. And what I think that Bernie Sanders is doing is committing to providing a response to Trump while most Democrats are, to the Americans, sitting on their hands. I'm not really sure what a lot of people are doing, but at least he and AOC are out there on this oligarchy tour. He's like, I am not the person that decides where the torch is being passed. I'm the person that just simply says, I'm going to do something, right? And so he's not trying to make that decision for the whole party, but it's time that the whole party starts to sit with him and take him more seriously to think about the way forward. I mean, both parties are dealing with public distrust. Like, we have to figure out how to come together. And I think Bernie, by going on podcasts like this, being open to not sitting in his own echo chamber, is really doing a good job. And I think that, that's a opening, even if you don't believe that it's AOC for the next iteration of the party, it's an opening to have a conversation with people like AOC, with people like Bernie Sanders, to figure out what this midterm strategy is. Because the worst thing that I really find annoying is that for 4 years, Trump was president and Democrats complained about all that he was doing, being a dictator, making all the Nazi references and everything that you can think about. But the plan was to just allow Biden to run again or to not have a plan and then switch to Kamala.
The plan was to not have a plan.
So that's like, I just don't, to me, that is ridiculous and they can't let it happen again. Every party makes mistakes. We know that Democrats have their pendulum swing, Republicans have their swing, but it's really time to come together and allow some traditional norms to be broken so you can figure out what the next step looks like.
Given the cancer news, I think the plan was to drag Biden over the finish line into his second term and then have him resign and have Kamala Harris be the president, honestly. But we're talking so much about that, and we're actually going to get back to that in a little bit. Staying on Bernie, I even think he handled this well, that exactly what you brought up, the question about AOC being the successor, and he says, well, because he's a actual democratic thinker, he's like, well, it's not for me to decide who the next leader of this movement is, it's for the people to decide. I like her, I've helped introduce her to hopefully a wider variety of people, and then it's up to her and it's up to what the voters think. So he even handled that in a way that is ideologically consistent for him. You know, credit where credit's due. I don't agree with Bernie Sanders on the vast majority of economic policies, at least. I think I somewhat agree with his foreign policy ideas, and I certainly appreciate his cultural views on identity politics not being the greatest thing for either for America or for the fate of the Democratic Party, that the Democratic Party tying itself to wokeness or pronouns in bios or whatever that is was not a good move from the standpoint of getting more Democrats elected. So, I continue to appreciate his participation in this dialogue, even though he's certainly not my guy. But
I think Bernie Sanders advising the next candidate for president would be a great idea. I think we definitely need to figure out a more centrist position to take in order to win the election in the future and not have somebody like Vance progress forward or Marco Rubio and be the candidate in a couple of years and beat the Democratic Party. But I also think that Bernie has a lot of good things to say and really resonated with young people. And if the conversation was all about age over the next election, first it was about Biden's age, then it was about Trump's age, then it was about both of their ages. And Bernie is a similar age to both of them, but also really translates, is on some of the most popular podcasts. Like you said, he's been on Joe Rogan, he's on Andrew Schulz podcast, and is just sitting there lounging like an everyday friend, having a chat. I think that says something about cutting through and speaking to young people as opposed to age saying it.
He's a reminder that it's not the number itself. Everybody ages differently, and he is not, again, while I don't agree with him, he's not lost any of his coherence or mental capacity. He's aging well. He's not hit that point yet where you see a diminished capability as we've clearly seen with Biden. So it is, people age differently. Some of our members of Congress are still, rare and ready to go in their maybe their late 80s. Although when you get up to that point,
we're not doing 100-year-old Congress people.
Just more and more likely that you're going to have some sudden decline. I mean, most of us know this from our elderly relatives, that they're fine one day, and then the next day you notice that, hey, you're a little out of it, and then it's like there can be a very rapid decline that happens during your term in office. So I would still like to get some younger people represented in the halls of Congress.
Bernie Sanders is needed to do that. So up next, from Springsteen to Beyonce, Trump accuses Kamala Harris of paying every celebrity for their endorsements. President Trump says he's launching investigations into high-profile celebrities who endorsed Kamala Harris in the last election.
He says he plans to look into whether or not they were paid for that endorsement. The president says in a post on Truth Social, quote, "How much did Kamala Harris pay Bruce Springsteen for his poor performance during her campaign for president? Why did he accept that money if he's such a fan of hers? Isn't that a major and illegal campaign contribution?" The president added, "What about Beyonce and how much went to Oprah and Bono? I'm going to call for a major investigation into this matter. Candidates aren't allowed to pay for endorsements, which is what Kamala did under the guise of paying for entertainment."
So last year, Oprah Winfrey openly denied taking a personal fee for the campaign event she did for Harris prior to the election, insisting that she only charged the campaign for event costs. The FEC filings show similar payments the Harris campaign made to Beyonce's production company, a grand total of $165,000 for shows she did in Texas the days before the election. It's important to note reimbursements are often associated with productions of that size.
Meantime, the Washington Free Beacon cited campaign disclosures in an article last month that alleged the Harris campaign did pay $50,000 to NBA superstar LeBron James for campaign event production, linking that to a deceptively edited attack ad on Trump. The article also said the Harris campaign paid $58,000 to Cardi B to speak at a campaign event. The rapper denied allegations that she was paid at the time. So these payments, if you look at them a little bit more closely, Lindsley, are kind of confusing. They're for massive sums of money, but they are also for logistics, for the staff of the event, for the production.
You don't want somebody to come out of their pocket, do you, to travel to go campaign for you if they really like you, right? That's not something that makes sense.
I mean,
right? Like,
frankly,
Oprah
I don't
put
care
on a
either
whole
way.
sit-down interview, and so yes, the production costs should be covered. She got it paid to her production company. I also think this is a ridiculous argument coming from Trump's side, who just took a $400 million jet from Qatar. And so I think that it's important to look at what's happening across the board and like, who's paying for you? Who paid for the parties after the inauguration? Facebook, Meta. They paid for Trump's parties. These are all
but that's the
sneaky contributions.
No.
Yeah, that end
They're
up
all
going donated to production costs for some big event.
See, Trump gets other people to pay for things. Kamala had to pay for things herself because she has no one who really likes her. That's the difference. People were willing to pay for Trump because they want to be seen favorably by his base.
I believe Snoop Dogg got paid
customers.
to be at his inauguration event. And so even if you round about that he paid the crypto guys that threw the event and they paid Snoop Dogg, it's irrelevant.
I don't really care.
Snoop Dogg got paid for the event. Everyone gets paid, okay, because they don't need to come out of pocket to endorse a candidate.
That's fine. I don't care either way. And in fact, I am not a big fan of campaign finance restrictions. I think money is speech, and you should be able to spend as much of your money to advocate for yourself in an electoral sense as you want. So I don't care that if Kamala if she wrote a check herself to LeBron James, I don't care. I will say that I think these payments to get celebrity endorsements, again, even if we're conceding it's not directly to the celebrity and there's nothing improper about it, I think it's reflective of a campaign strategy that was not good. A campaign strategy that was, if we can get Queen Latifah out there, we're going to win this election. Like, nobody's listening to celebrities. The Taylor Swift endorsement is not going to put you over the finish line. It's outdated Democratic thinking that, well, if this person supports me, that's going to, do really well with me to win votes. Whereas look what Trump did. Trump went to, Republicans had historically been underperforming with young people, with minorities. Trump went on all these podcasts where a lot of young men, white, black, every race, listened to like these shows, Joe Rogan and other things, and he talked to them for hours and hours and hours, and he won votes that way. Whereas Kamala thought, because you like LeBron James or you like Oprah or you like whoever it is, I'll do an event with them, and it's like, and there's no depth to it, there's no engagement, and that kind of photo op is gonna work for me. That was a bad strategy.
I think she did the best she could with what time she had, right? So we can have
a
full dialogue about the timing that she had to organize a major campaign, the fact that she had to use a lot of Biden's staff to continue forward with a campaign that should have been wholly hers.
Yeah, that was the biggest defect she had.
Right,
she was working with the liars.
Well, there are several, that's debatable. There are several conversations around what went wrong in that campaign, and agreed. Maybe the amount of money they raised broke records, and so they should figure out how to use it better. But that's the strategy reset part, right? Back in the day, bringing out a major celebrity during a campaign was a huge deal, right? We didn't have access to the same level of social media and information that we do now. So the celebrity telling you something meant something. I think with today, especially
Not
younger
anymore.
generation, nobody cares. So we learned that lesson. Everyone learned that lesson. And I think that this is a good test. That was a good test for the Democratic Party to figure out how to reset. And I think that's the main conversation about looking at how much they were able to raise, being impressed by that number, and knowing there are several people that still support the Democratic Party, and figuring out what to do with those supporters.
Yeah, money, like celebrity endorsements, really just isn't everything. You know, Hillary Clinton outspent Trump in 2016. Doesn't matter. It can do a lot for you, but it can't fundamentally rescue a campaign that was troubled for other reasons. That does it for us today on Rising. Thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. See you later.
I'm well. How are you? Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great. Yep.